A reading from the second book of Samuel. David returned from his defeat of the Amalekites and spent 2 days in Ziklag. On the third day, a man came from Saul's camp, with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. Going to David, he fell to the ground in homage. David asked him, "Where do you come from?" He replied, "I have escaped from the camp of the children of Israel." "Tell me what happened," David bade him. He answered that many of the soldiers had fled the battle, and that many of them had fallen and were dead, among them Saul and his son Jonathan. David seized his garments and rent them, and all the men who were with him did likewise. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the soldiers of the Lord and the clans of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. Alas, the glory of Israel, Saul, slain upon your heights. How can the warriors have fallen? Saul and Jonathan, beloved and cherished, separated neither in life nor in death, swifter than eagles, stronger than lions. Women of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you in scarlet and in finery, who decked your attire with ornaments of gold. How can the warriors have fallen in the thick of the battle, slain upon your heights? I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. Most dear have you been to me. More precious have I held love for you than love for women. How can the warriors have fallen? The weapons of war have perished. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Let us see your face, Lord, and we shall be saved.
Let us see your face, Lord, and we shall be saved.
O shepherd of Israel, hearken. O guide of the flock of Joseph. From your throne upon the cherubim, shine forth. Before Ephraim, Benjamin, and Manasseh, rouse your power and come to save us. Let us see your face, Lord, and we shall be saved. O Lord of hosts, how long will you burn with anger while your people pray? You have fed them with the bread of tears and given them tears to drink in ample measure. You have left us to be fought over by our neighbors, and our enemies mock us. Let us face the Lord, and we shall be saved.
Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia. Alleluia, alleluia. Open our hearts, O Lord, to listen to the words of your Son. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Dominus vobiscum.
Et cum spiritu tuo.
Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Marcum.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
Jesus came with his disciples into the house. Again the crowd gathered, making it impossible for them even to eat. When his relatives heard of this, they set out to seize him, for they said, "He is out of his mind." Verbum Domini.
Last tibi Christe.
friars have, for the most part, gone to the east, to the March for Life, which was yesterday, or the Walk for Life, which is today. And you can watch that on EWTN. Listen to it at 2:30. It starts Eastern Time. Our coverage today of the Walk for Life in San Francisco, Walk for Life West Coast, as well as the Walk in Los Angeles. So we have our visiting servers here that we're happy to have. David, who's working on his doctorate. His wife, Deborah, works in production here. Gus, who helps the friars with our media apostolate. And James, who takes care of the sacristy work here. You know that the candles are perfectly vertical because he actually puts a level on those to make sure they're perfectly straight. So if you ever see them drifting off a little bit, you know he's starting to slack off a little bit. So we're grateful to have them here. And today we have this first reading from the second book of Samuel. And we see David grieving over his dear friend Jonathan. And if you read 1 Samuel chapter 18, you'll see how close these two friends were, David and Jonathan. Here's what we read about their friendship. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. He loved him as his own soul. And they made a covenant with each other. So there was this close friendship. They're often held up as an example of friendship, something that is a support for us in this life. A man would not wish to live if he didn't have friends. So friends are a certain consolation and support for us in this life. And this is what David experienced in Jonathan when Jonathan's father was trying to kill him. So there's this close friendship, and then he learns that Saul and Jonathan have died in battle. And so David says that he mourned and wept and fasted until the evening for Saul and Jonathan, because they had fallen by the sword. And then he says, Saul and Jonathan, beloved and cherished. I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother, most dear have you been to me. So grief is a part of human experience in this valley of tears. We experience grief. How do we deal with grief? You know, I think that's one of the things that Justin Fatika, in his little mini-series, You're Amazing, he will go into these schools, and often the young people don't know of the sufferings of their fellow classmates. And they don't know what their fellow classmates are often going through, whether it's broken home or the death of a parent or a sibling or some trial that they're experiencing in life, or that they just feel, that they're ugly or whatever it may be that they're experiencing. And that he brings that out, and that they see that everybody has something they're struggling with, and let's support each other. Let's look to God for strength in our grief. So grief is a reality in this valley of tears, but it doesn't have to be something that completely devastates us and overwhelms us. So I want to talk about that today. First of all, the experience of grief. This is what C.S. Lewis wrote after the death of his dearly loved wife, Joy. She had struggled with cancer, and then it had come back, and eventually he knew that she was going to die, which happened. And here's how he expressed grief, C.S. Lewis, in his book, A Grief Observed. He said, "No one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear. I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep swallowing. At other times, it feels like being mildly drunk or having a concussion. There's a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in. It's so uninteresting. And yet, I want others to be about me. I dread the moments when the house is empty If only they would talk to one another and not to me. So there's a certain solitude that a person experiences in their grief, and yet they don't want to be just left alone. And there's a certain, everything in life just kind of becomes dull and gray in that time of grieving. In the most recent issue of the National Catholic Register is an article by Dr. Donald DeMarco. I always love his insights. He's got these wonderful insights and very practical teachings. And the title of this article is 5 Remedies for Pain and Sorrow. And he is a Thomist. He loves St. Thomas Aquinas, whose feast day is this month, the 28th of this month. He says we often think of Thomas as just this intellect, just this intellect, but he says he's one of the greatest psychologists in history. Shakespeare and Aquinas are 2 great psychologists. They understand what's going on inside people, and they can express it. And he says he's also very practical. And so, drawing on Thomas Aquinas, he has 5 things that Thomas says are remedies for pain and sorrow in our life. And he says today, in our technological society, we're often looking for a tranquilizer or some kind of medication. But these are natural, they're free, they're cost-free, and they're readily available. So these are things that Thomas Aquinas, back in the 13th, 14th century, already talked about. So here's what he says. First, the first remedy is pleasure. So we have these appetites, we have these desires, and they tend toward the good, right? So we want something good, or what we perceive as good. Our senses, our appetites, not just our appetite for food, but all of our longings and desires are directed towards something good. We want something that we perceive as good, and that's their natural end. So suffering, pain, is something that's contrary to that. Pleasure, on the other hand, is a kind of a repose for these appetites in what is good. So Donald says, food at a funeral, for example, can assist in relieving the sorrow caused by the loss of a loved one. So legitimate pleasures, things that we take delight in. And I think we should have something every day that we look forward to, something that we enjoy, some good, legitimate pleasures. And these can be something that assuage the pain and the struggles of the day or of our lives. And the key is finding something that is truly good for us, truly beneficial for us. Not just stuffing our faces with food that can bring some temporary sort of comfort, but doing things that maybe are more beneficial to us in the long run, maybe developing our musical talents or woodworking or whatever it is, some sort of thing that we find a certain enjoyment in, and developing those talents, physical exercise and those sorts of things can be good pleasures, and other pleasures that Donald will be talking about also from Thomas Aquinas. The second remedy Aquinas lists is tears and other outward expressions such as groans or spoken words. Something hurtful hurts all the more if we keep it shut up. Weeping is an escape route for pain and sorrow. It is a way that lessens their torments. So today's psalm was Psalm 80. And this psalm, it's believed, was written when the northern kingdom of Israel had been conquered by the Assyrians and devastated. People have been taken, into captivity. So it's this grieving that is being expressed in Psalm 80. You have fed them with the bread of tears and given them tears to drink in ample measure. That's one of the things about the Psalms, that the Psalms express all of the human emotions that we experience in this life, both the joy and exultation in God and the beauty of his creation and the devastation of trials and difficulties, or calling out to God, why? And looking for answers, but also then expressing trust. That's what Jesus is quoting on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? But that psalm concludes with words of trust and confidence in God. So the second remedy then is our tears, outward expressions. Thirdly, the compassion of friends. Sorrow has a depressing effect and tends to weigh a person down. When we have friends, as I mentioned earlier, it lightens our burdens. It's as if our burden, they're helping to carry the weight of that burden. It's said a sorrow is half a sorrow when it is, you have a friend to share it with and to help you with it. A joy is twice a joy when you have someone to share that joy with. And so we could think in this year of mercy about comforting the afflicted. Who are those that we know who are sorrowing, who have lost someone, who are grieving, that we can be that comfort to them. That is another of the remedies, the compassion of friends. Often we can go to funerals and we don't really have anything profound to say to them except, I give you my condolences. I'm sorry for your loss. But we're there. And that is an expression of we're with you. We love you. And Thomas says that just that their presence and their expression of love is comforting in itself. That they do love us, that they want to be with us in our own struggles. The fourth remedy is a contemplation of truth. So, contemplating divine things, the higher region of things. We may not know exactly why certain torments occur, but the thought that God has his reasons is a source of consolation and comfort. And this knowledge or thinking of the eternal things is a source of comfort and pleasure for us too. St. Bonaventure said, we should think of heaven every day. The story of Viktor Frankl. He wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. He and his wife and his family was put into a concentration camp during the Second World War, a Jewish psychiatrist. And he was thinking, well, why are there those that they seem to do okay, they seem to get by, and there are others who just completely are desolate in the concentration camp. And as a psychiatrist, he was interested in what was the difference. And here was his answer, that survivors had some meaning or purpose, some hope in the future to propel them forward. Where those that didn't, they just simply gave up. They had no hope for the future. Frankl said, he who has a why to live can almost bear the how you're having to live. So if you have a meaning, and he says if life has a meaning, then there must be a meaning in suffering too. We may not always understand the meaning of that suffering, but we can always have confidence in God. And he said, we who lived in the concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts, comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So they had decided they're in this awful circumstance, but they're going to practice charity. They're going to comfort others. They're going to give them their last piece of bread. They found a meaning. And Viktor Frankl himself said that he would use the insights, he looked toward the future, that he would use these insights to help people in the future of what it was that could help people. So this fourth remedy then is contemplation of the truth, thinking of the higher things. And we know that ultimately everything turns out well for the Christian, that we have eternal glory prepared for those who suffer for a little while. And the fifth, and this is perhaps the most practical one of Thomas Aquinas, a good sleep and a bath. Okay, a good sleep and a warm bath. Because the body, the reasons he says these are good is it tends to bring nature back to its normal state. Sleep and bathing help to restore nature's equilibrium. It's a recovering pleasure. St. Ambrose writes, sleep restores the tired limbs to labor, refreshes the weary mind, and banishes sorrow. So again, those 5 remedies that Donald DeMarco quotes from Thomas Aquinas: pleasure, some legitimate pleasure. We should have something each day that we can delight in. Second, the tears, letting them flow, expressing our sorrow. Third, compassion of friends. Fourth, contemplating the truth, the higher realities, trusting in God. And fourth, a good sleep and a good warm bath. So may we in this valley of tears always go forward with hope, because we are not hopeless, we are not orphans. We have trials in this life, but we know that the end of the story is glory.